Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota Podcast. That's where you can interact with us of the Full Quota Podcast here in South Africa. It is a South African cricket podcast where we discuss all things South African cricket. We did a review of the first week of our 4-day series. Our domestic season has started, and in earnest, essentially, because some people don't like T20, but it's still a game. But for those that don't like T20, the season started, so do check that out. Some interesting results have happened. Some draws which were very disappointing for Tim, I must assume, outside of that. But now we're talking World T20 preview. It is South Africa against Bangladesh tomorrow. A must-win game for both teams to keep their hopes alive based on the way this tournament is going. Teams are still in it. I know Bangladesh have only lost 3 games, but there is a scenario where you can end up with the 4 teams below England ending up on 4 points each with 2 wins each. So for Bangladesh, essentially tomorrow is important because that sets them up for that game to finish like that, where South Africa do need to win to kind of push themselves closer and then set them up for the game against England to see if they can qualify. If not, or ask for a help from a friend, i.e. Bangladesh against Australia in that final game to see if maybe if Bangladesh beats Australia, South Africa can come through the back door, and that back door is net run rate. But we're going to talk about all of that. Let me just check in with Tim. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm not sure how I'm feeling. This tournament has been a bit of a roller coaster. I think the fact, just on a personal level, the fact that I saw not a ball of the Sri Lankan game because I was watching club cricket was probably a good thing. I think it was probably a good thing.
Tim, you missed out on a lot. South Africa came so close to getting themselves, essentially, in my eyes, eliminated. Everyone else who likes doing maths decides to will think otherwise. But yeah, if those 2 overs between Kagiso and David Miller go anywhere else, we would have been talking a different story today. We'd be a lot angrier doing this podcast. But we've got Towheed Qureshi on, who's going to be discussing all things Bangladesh. Things aren't as rosy as they've been over the past year for Bangladesh, but we're going to be talking about that going into this. So let's bring Towheed on and discuss with him about Bangladesh. Hi, Towheed. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm really good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No, well, I think we are thankful that you have come on, because now we get to have that little bit of that international flavor to our South African podcast, a little bit of a Bangladeshi flavor. Towheed, looking at Bangladesh this year in T20s, they've had, as Tim says, I'm going to use Tim's adjective, roller coaster, because they've had massive highs in the series wins against Zimbabwe, Australia, and New Zealand. And also some highs in the qualifiers to get through into that. But there have been some lows, and largely they've come through in the Super 12s. There's some stats that I've been reading where Bangladesh have only won 1 Super 12 game in the World T20, and they've lost all 3. But there's a different story to this Bangladeshi side, because in the games against Sri Lanka and the West Indies, they were actually in the games. They're just not finishing. What's been happening in this tournament that hasn't happened prior?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, just focusing in on those 2 games that you mentioned, I guess, the West Indies game and the Sri Lanka game. You're absolutely right. I think Bangladesh, had their chances in both of those games to win. I think what it ultimately comes down to, if you can kind of pinpoint a trend, I guess there's a couple of things. It's just not quite realizing when those key moments come about in a game. Firstly, recognizing that this is a key moment and that we need to really stay on top of our game and to really close out the game. They didn't do that against Sri Lanka, so they had Sri Lanka 4 down. They were about 70 odd at the time. Chasing, what were they chasing? I think it was 140 odd to win, about 10 overs or so remaining. And yeah, basically they just put their foot off the gas. They brought on part-time bowlers bowling off spin. The idea being around sort of matchups against Sri Lankan left-handers, but the issue was that these were sort of part-time bowlers, i.e., the captain himself came on to bowl Mahmudullah Riyad and Afif Hussain, and so that allowed the Sri Lankans to grow in confidence, and there was a fantastic innings there from Asalanka. And a good partnership between him and Rajapakse, which basically won the game. So yeah, it's just playing that sort of smart cricket at the vital moment. Similarly, against the West Indies the other day, the chase was kind of looking pretty good at one stage. There was a decent partnership between Liton Das and Mahmudullah, but again, it was a bit of a timid kind of chase rather than looking to be a bit bolder to try to finish things off by like the 19th over. You got a sense that throughout that chase they were just happy to bat deep, take that chase well into the last over, which is what happened. And ultimately, when you do that, it becomes a lottery, as we all know. And as it happened, the West Indies death bowlers bowled fantastically well. Andre Russell bowled a fantastic last over. Dwayne Bravo bowled some good overs towards the death as well. So, yeah, again, that really did cost Bangladesh.
Do you think? No, I tend to agree. Do you think? I know hindsight is a wonderful word and it's often used too much. But do you think maybe they made a mistake in their selection? They went with the sort of younger guys, as you say, the more experienced guys. Do you think they could have gone with a bit more of an experience there to come through in those tight situations that you mentioned?
Possibly. I mean, looking at the squad and the playing 11, what I would say is, the core of the team is made up of, the experience between Mahmudullah, Mushfiq, Shakib. And, the news has come out over the last couple of days that Shakib isn't going to be... he injured himself in that West Indies game. I think it's a hamstring injury, so he's not going to be taking part in the last two games of the World Cup. So, yeah, Bangladesh really are dependent on that core kind of experience group. And, the other players kind of, in effect, play around that kind of core. In terms of selection, I would say, the only one kind of contentious it wasn't a selection issue necessarily, but Tamim Iqbal, the vastly experienced left-handed opener, declared himself he withdrew from the squad or from contention to be in the squad. Basically, he was just coming back from injury. He felt he wasn't he didn't have enough kind of match practice leading into the tournament, which is why he decided not to participate. So, I mean, he would be the only person who's kind of not in this squad, who's kind of making an obvious case to be in the squad. I was talking to someone else recently about the fact that I guess countries like Bangladesh, they actually have quite a limited kind of talent pool, I would say, in terms of professional cricketers who are making a genuine case for kind of international selection. So yeah, there's not a huge number of players out there who are really kind of banging at the door, demanding to be selected, I'd say.
That's true. Yeah, and so in terms of this Bangladeshi side, obviously, they have it in their locker to beat the big nations, and we saw that in that series against Australia and New Zealand. What's the difference between those series and this World Cup from a playing perspective, because the playing personnel, as you said, limited talent pool hasn't changed much.
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious thing, I guess, is are the sort of pitches they're playing on. So those two series against New Zealand and Australia. So they beat Australia 4-1, and I think it was 3-2 against New Zealand. So basically, it was 7-3 across both of those series. They were played almost back to back. So yeah, the major difference there is that the kind of pitches they were playing on. So they were played exclusively at the same venue, which is in Dhaka, Mpho in Dhaka. So, the pitches there are traditionally very slow, very low, very kind of conducive to spin. They were very low scoring games. Basically, if you put on 100 batting first, you'd have a very good chance of kind of winning in those games. So, yeah, the big difference here is obviously, it's interesting because I think the UAE pitches haven't played brilliantly, but they're certainly better than the pitches in Dhaka. So that's meant that the spinners have had to kind of, I guess, adjust to maybe sort of less assistance than they had sort of received previously in Dhaka, and it also means that the quicker bowlers who essentially, Bangladesh have like a group of fast bowlers now, who have some sort of genuine pace, but those pitches back in Dhaka aren't really conducive to their sorts of bowling, so they often don't really get much of a run out during series. So a lot of the time they're kind of thinking on their feet a little bit. And yeah, we've seen, like you say, glimpses in this World Cup. There have been some good, I'd say, bowling performances. I mean, I'd say bowling is probably Bangladesh's strength over their batting. I'd say their batting is very brittle. So, there have been some good bowling performances. Mehdi Hassan has bowled pretty well throughout the tournament so far. Obviously, Shakib, before he got injured, particularly in the qualifying round, picked up a stack of wickets, and players as well. Some of the faster bowlers as well. Bowlers such as Sharaful Islam, who's quite a young, new pace bowler who's come into the setup. He bowled very well actually in that West Indies game, and Tuscan Ahmed as well. He's bowled pretty well in patches. So yeah, there's been some encouraging signs on the bowling front.
Yeah, just on that, this certainly goes sort of before the World Cup for me, but I've been very impressed with that pace bowling unit in the last 18 months to 2 years. As you rightly point out, they've got genuine ability and genuine pace. It's been something that Bangladesh has been missing the last few years. They've just had Mustafa and he's just been like the mainstay. But Tuscan and Islam have really come to the fore. A man we will know very, very well in South African circles. So just talk to us about Otis Gibson's influence on that pace attack and on the ability to get those guys to get to where they are now and how they've improved.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, as you well know, Otis Gibson worked kind of wonders with the England pace attack going back probably, when was that? Sort of around about 15, I think 2015, yes. 2016. He was bowling coach in the England setup and kind of worked real wonders there, certainly in their sort of white ball cricket as well, I'd say. So yeah, he's really been at the helm in terms of trying to develop a fast bowling unit. And actually before Otis Gibson was in charge, Courtney Walsh was also was a bowling coach prior to that. So, and I guess he had a similar role there in terms of trying to develop this quick bowling unit, fast bowling unit. And yeah, you're right. They have made big strides, I'd say. So, Shoreful Islam being the biggest kind of example of that. So young, quick bowler. He was part of the under-19 World Cup winning team for Bangladesh last year, which took place in South Africa. And, within the space of about 2 months, he was capped. Earlier this year, he was capped across all formats. So, he made his Test debut. Well, I think, first of all, he made his T20 international debut, followed by his ODI debut, I think, and then followed by his Test debut. So, highly, highly rated by the team management and the coaching staff as well. But yeah, and the other sort of good news story on that front, I would say, is Tuscan Ahmed as well. So someone who's been around for a little while. He's been, I think he made his debut actually during the 2014 T20 World Cup. So he's been around a little while. Picked up, quite a few injuries. So he's kind of been in and out of the team due to injury. But earlier this year, there was a series that Bangladesh played away. They played in New Zealand, which was kind of his first real kind of comeback series after, obviously there was a pandemic last year. So almost for a couple of years he hadn't played international cricket. That was his comeback, and he clearly got himself into really, really good shape, done some really good rehab. He looked to be bowling quicker, and he also looked to be fitter than he had been previously. So yeah, he's certainly another good news story. But yeah, what I would say is, essentially there's always this conflict between, the pitches, I guess, essentially that are prepared in Bangladesh, in Dhaka in particular, which, as I've said, aren't really conducive to that kind of bowling. And so, I guess something that Bangladesh cricket has struggled with for at least 2 years now, maybe longer, is, balancing, short-term kind of gains by beating teams at home comfortably, by preparing spinning wickets, but then, playing away from home, be it the UAE, be it New Zealand, be it, wherever, and, ending up kind of losing because of, a lack of sort of preparation, or a lack of, skills development, essentially, for their quicker bowlers. Yeah.
So I think over the past couple of days, we've been seeing a lot of news stories. The Bangladesh board, the selectors talking about how poor the batting is. How would you describe the Bangladeshi batting order and their performances in this World Cup so far? Obviously, it's not enough because they're not winning games, but as Russell Domingo says, it's not about winning. We just need to figure out the process. But yeah, how would you characterize that batting lineup? And in also considering now that Shakib is out.
Yeah, so certainly, yeah, I think the batting has looked very brittle at times. If you look at the openers, actually, so yeah, I'd say Mohammed Naeem is one of the, another bright spot for Bangladesh during this tournament. So he scored 2 half centuries now in, how many games have there been? Well, he played 2 games in the qualifying round, and he's played all 3 games here. So yeah, he scored two half centuries in 5 games, and a young, exciting prospect there. Liton Das, the other opener, he's been quite short of confidence and short of runs, although he actually put up a decent score against, he made runs against that West Indies attack the other day. And that sometimes T20 is a game of small margins. So if you think, I don't know if you watched that game, but the penultimate over, Liton Das, the last ball of the penultimate over, Liton Das hit, I think it was towards the long off, where Jason Holder caught him right on the boundary. So, if that ball was just,
a few meters,
even a meter higher, if Jason Holder was, a few centimeters shorter, then
6 foot.
if it was Ravi Rampal instead of Jason Holder,
exactly,
Bangladesh were winning the game, and we're talking.
Exactly. But I get, at the same time, he's fielding there for that particular reason.
For that reason,
I suppose. But if that 6, or if that shot had gone for 6, Bangladesh would have needed 7 in that last over. Liton Das and Mahmudullah would have been the not-out batsman of the crease. So it would have been a totally different story. But Liton Das is one of these. I guess there's a few players within the Bangladesh ranks who are very kind of inconsistent, essentially, and have frustrated kind of a lot of Bangladesh fans because of that reason. I'd say Liton Das is one of those. Again, he's been on the scene for a little while, but hasn't quite kind of managed to kind of elevate himself to that next level of just being consistent, being someone who you could depend on for a good start. And then Shakib obviously is injured. He's not going to be playing in the remaining tournament. He's been coming in, or he was coming in at number 3 in this tournament so far. I mean, runs wise, I was looking at this earlier. He hasn't done brilliantly with the bat, so he got a couple of 40s in the qualifying round against PNG and Oman. Other than that, he hasn't really done much at all with the bat. So, I think he'd be disappointed. He's actually looking at his sort of stats across the board. I think he will be disappointed with his kind of contribution to the World Cup, because if you look at, he's ended up with, I've just got it in front of me here. So he's ended up with 11 wickets in total, but only 2 of those wickets came in the Super 12s, which were against Sri Lanka. He's only taken the 2 wickets in the Super 12s, and he's only scored 23 runs as well in the Super 12s. So for someone with such a high kind of caliber, and someone with such high standards, I think he'll be disappointed with that. And he did well, with bat and ball in the qualifiers, but again, you would expect him to pick up lots of wickets and runs against that sort of opposition, I guess. Not wishing to disrespect the Scots in particular, because obviously Scotland did beat Bangladesh in that first game. It'll be interesting. I think tomorrow Shumar Shaka will come in and probably bat at number 3. He's kind of been in and out of the side a little bit. I was kind of similar to Liton Das. He's in that sort of category of being frustratingly inconsistent, I would say. He's, on his day, he can look $1 million, very kind of graceful, very languid, kind of fluent player at his best. But as I say, we probably haven't seen it enough in this tournament. I'd expect Mushfiqur Rahim to come in at number 4, as he has done throughout the tournament. Again, he started the tournament quite low on confidence, I would say, but actually in the last couple of games against England and against the West Indies, he's kind of looked more like his old self. He's a very good kind of run accumulator. He can play kind of all around the wicket. He can play 360 degrees. He's got a number of kind of scoops and ramps and reverses. But equally, he does get out a lot to some of those strokes. So I expect him there, and then I would expect Mahmudullah Riyad to come in at number 5. yeah, obviously the captain. He's played pretty well, I would say. He's done pretty well with the bat, but yeah, his captaincy, or certainly a couple of his captaincy decisions, i.e., the two games I was talking about earlier, or those two incidences in those two games against West Indies and Sri Lanka, can certainly be called into question there in terms of his tactics and did he make the right call at the right time. And then after that, Afif Hussain, who's more of a finisher, I think will come in. And I think tomorrow they're talking about playing someone who hasn't played so far, a guy called Shamim Hussain. Basically because of injuries and because of Shakib's injury, I think he'll be drafted in to probably come in at what we're looking at 7. You got and then you've probably got the 4 bowlers. So the Fizz, and then Mehedi, and then maybe Tuscan, maybe Shoreful as well, or another spinner. I don't know. I'm not quite sure if I've named 11 or 12 there.
I think
you've named the full 11. You've covered every single player up until 11. I think I'm much better understanding now of how the Bangladeshi team looks like.
I mean, just going back to your question about how I see the batting, I think one criticism as well of that sort of the top 6, the top 5 or top 6 there, I would say they're probably all a bit too similar in terms of, well, what I mean by that is, I guess, in terms of their strike rates and just the way they play. So in general, actually, there's not a lot of power hitters in the Bangladesh lineup. So, Mahmudullah Riyad can kind of clear the ropes. Afif Hussain can potentially. But, in that sort of top 5 or 6, I wouldn't say there's anyone, like a Joss Butler. Okay, maybe that's a bit unfair because,
nobody has a Joss Butler.
How many players are like a Joss Butler exactly? But there's no one who can sort of give you 2 or 3 boundaries and an over just to get the team going, or to break the shackles, or just to change the direction of the game. I wouldn't say that there's anyone like that in the top order, and I think that's certainly a shortcoming.
That's a very good point, because when I was having a glance at the side, I looked at their strike rates, and those strike rates really came out and surprised me. I have problems with many of the strike rates of the South African team, but that really came out of me. Sort of 115, 120 seems to be the general thing with the Bangladesh side. But what are your overall thoughts on tomorrow? Where do you think it's going to be won or lost? Keep in mind that the last time you guys played against South Africa in a T20, David Miller made a 35-ball 100. And what he just did against Sri Lanka. So, where do you think what do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
I'd be very surprised if Miller scores another sort of 35-ball 100. I mean, I hope he doesn't. But I will answer your question. But just to go back to those strike rates that you were talking about, it is interesting. I think maybe you have to put them into context a little bit, i.e., the most of those games that the Bangladesh players playing T20s would be back home in Dhaka. And if you look at the context of the very low scoring kind of pitches, those strike rates are quite, consistent with that, I suppose. But to go back to your question about tomorrow, how do I see it? Well, I mean, essentially the way I see it, Bangladesh, I know theoretically or mathematically they can perhaps still qualify for the semis, but as far as I'm concerned, I can't see that happening. So the way that I would like them to approach it is, just to take, they've got 2 games left in the tournament, just to play with a bit of freedom. There's they shouldn't feel a lot of pressure, like I say, because, that pressure of qualification or whatever, I would say, isn't really there anymore. So hopefully that kind of frees them up a little bit, to, certainly in terms of the way they bat, to maybe try and bat with a little bit more intent, and, a little bit more aggression. In terms of, I expect South Africa to be on a bit of a high after their last game against Sri Lanka. Certainly pulling that one out the bag when it could have easily gone the other way. It's interesting because I guess both teams have had two close games in their last game. It's gone against Bangladesh, but it's gone in South Africa's favour. So I expect them to be on a bit of a high after that. But I really would like to see Bangladesh win, at least one game in the Super 12s, be it against South Africa or Australia, preferably both. I just think whatever happens, and I said this actually before the West Indies game, because they played so badly against England, they just didn't turn up. But actually, same thing happened with Australia. The same thing happened with West Indies against England. So actually, in that context, losing so convincingly to England isn't actually, there's no shame in it, because they seem to be such a freak of a team at the moment. It's what I said before the West Indies game was, I just wanted to see Bangladesh compete, which is certainly what they did against the West Indies. I think on top of that, what I'd like to see them is to kind of learn a little bit from that West Indies game and the Sri Lanka game. And again, I think this has been a constant theme for certainly the last 12 months, is to really understand and appreciate when those vital passages of play are taking place, and to make sure that they're switched on, make sure during those vital passages of play that they're going to take those catches, because their catching's been pretty dreadful. They dropped a couple of catches against West Indies and against Sri Lanka as well. So to recognise when those key moments in the game arise, to make sure that they're making the right decisions at those kind of crucial times. And just to be switched on and just to compete, really.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting, because I think Bangladesh. I see Bangladesh as slightly more of a banana peel for South Africa, a team that's actually a little bit closer than what their performances provide, largely because of what happened against New Zealand and Australia, because South Africa doesn't play spin well. So I think South Africa averages 18.8 versus spin compared to 25.5 against pace. And so I was under the impression that obviously Bangladesh would be slightly more confident about facing a team that actually does struggle against spin. Mehdi Hassan can provide a lot of problems. Obviously Shakib is gone, but there's many other spinners that can cause problems for South Africa. In that Mustafizur's left arm seam has always been a problem for any batsman around the world. He's that quality, and so I do think that that's where, for instance, if South Africa were batting first, Bangladesh could put South Africa under a little bit of pressure, similar to what they did against the West Indies, and I think they did that against Sri Lanka as well. But the games didn't work out in that manner. Do you agree with that? And also the South African flavor. You've got South Africans and former South African coaches in that coaching setup that probably want to pull out to stop South Africa from progressing to the World Cup, through the World Cup.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It was interesting. I joined the pre-match, the Bangladesh pre-match press conference earlier on today, and Russell Domingo was kind of saying exactly what you were saying there about how South Africa do have a bit of a weakness against spin. He didn't want to give too many plans away, but essentially, that's an area I think Bangladesh will target South Africa against tomorrow. Actually, just thinking back to that team that I went through, yeah, I would expect them to actually play Tuscan Ahmed, who's a frontline left arm spinner. He hasn't played all the games, but he's played a few. I think he's played about maybe three games so far. Certainly with Shakib not playing, I think he will definitely come into the team. And I think you're right. I think him and Mehdi Hassan will form that kind of spin combination. And then, yeah, like you say, you've got the fizz there as well. And yeah, there are a couple of part-time spinners amongst some of the batters as well. So yeah, I expect that will be kind of the way that Bangladesh approach things with the ball. And yeah, it's interesting what you say actually in terms of the Bangladesh coaching setup. I think actually they've sorry, excuse me. I think certainly over the last maybe 10 years, maybe a bit longer, there's always been a bit of a South African presence amongst the coaching staff. There's been a bit of a constant in that respect. So yeah, obviously you've got Russell Domingo there. You've got Ashwell Prince, who's the batting consultant who's just drafted in for this tournament. And who else have you got? The fielding coach, a guy called Ryan Cook, I think. I don't know if you know him. Yes. But he's actually been with the team at least
a lot longer than Russell.
I think he's the longest member of that coaching setup because he was there before the 2019 World Cup. So I think he's been there at least 3 years, maybe longer. Interesting that, not to point fingers, but their fielding really hasn't been up to the mark in this tournament. And so, yeah, I think that's one area that they really need to sort of focus and concentrate and, who knows, do something new in terms of coaching going forward. But yeah, I'm
sure Ashwell could do a few fielding drills if needed.
I'm sure he could. But yeah, no. So I'm sure all of those sort of coaches will want to sort of put one over on their native country. So yeah, no, it brings a different dynamic into the contest for sure.
Yeah, we've seen it before. I don't want to mention teams, but we've seen it before when a South African goes overseas and is a coaching setup with another national side, knocks us out of the World Cup. It's happened before. We always ask this with our guests with this World Cup. What is the general feeling within Bangladesh with their hopes for the World Cup? What were they before the tournament? Is there genuine interest at the tournament? Yeah, just the general feeling within Bangladesh at the moment.
I mean, I don't have a direct. So I'm based in the UK in South London. So I don't have a. Obviously I speak to a lot. I've got lots of relatives and friends and people I know back in Bangladesh. So, I would say prior to any cricket tournament, there's huge interest, there's huge expectation for the team to perform well. I think prior to the tournament, they were harboring, I don't know how realistic the ambitions were, but they were certainly, I think, quite confident. Certainly after the Sri Lanka, the New Zealand and Australian series of doing well and potentially, getting into the semi-finals. So from that point of view, yeah, I would say they've underachieved. I'd say they've actually underachieved by a fair way, really. If you look at the three games in qualifying, they lost to Scotland. They shouldn't have lost to Scotland, really. I mean, fantastic performance on that day by the Scottish team. That has to be said. But it was a shock result nonetheless. So they lost to Scotland, and really, the only 2 wins so far that they've achieved are against teams that they would expect to beat, which are PNG and Oman. And like we said, in the Super 12s, a couple of close games against West Indies and Sri Lanka, but they just haven't managed to get across the line. So in terms of how I sort of see how they've performed, I would say that they have underachieved. And I think the real concern for me is, it seems to be a bit of a trend from tournament to tournament. Not everyone, but it's almost like a regular thing is that people sort of say, well, this is going to be Bangladesh's real coming of age. This is a tournament where, they get to a semi-final or maybe even a final and, consistently play well. And but, it just hasn't happened in this tournament. It didn't happen in the 2019 World Cup. So disappointing. But, as I say, they've got 2 games to perhaps, well, the way I see is to kind of salvage something from this World Cup. I mean, if they pulled off 2 defeats or 2 wins rather against South Africa and Australia, I think it'll be interesting because people will probably remember the last 2 games. And on the whole, I think people will probably be quite satisfied with that performance. But I would certainly say they've underachieved.
Okay. Tawhid, thank you very much for joining us. You've given us a very in-depth look into the Bangladeshi side, and we wish you and your country all the best against South Africa tomorrow. May the best team win, and just have a great day further.
Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
Sure. Thank you very much, Tawhid. Have a great day.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Tim, that was comprehensive. Bangladesh are a team. I wasn't expecting to meet Bangladesh at this level of confidence. I was expecting them to be wanting to take a scalp of a big nation, and that may happen. They came up against West Indies and they did quite well. They just couldn't get over the line there, and you kind of see that maybe they can live up to this game. From a South African perspective, we've got a couple of comments. What changes do you make tomorrow?
Difficult to say because I didn't see a single ball of the Sri Lankan game.
Okay.
I must put it out there.
Let me ask you this question. Is it Riza out, Heinrich in? Because I think
hell no. No. Look, I still stand by every word that I said about Riza, but no. No, look, the guy is doing better than his overall numbers in his career. It's marginal, but he is doing better. He's doing better.
So,
he's striking the ball well. He's settled in that position quite nicely. It is most definitely Riza stays.
But doesn't that, as Lawrence Bailey notes, he says, don't you think Timber should go back up to the top to play with QDK and Riza at number 5 with Rassi at 3? Riza has some sort of a power game. Wouldn't that make more sense? And he also says Riza plays well against spin, especially through the middle overs. What do you think? Because I think from my end, I want Riza out of the side. Heinrich Klaasen must come in. Mark Boucher must live and die with the decision to take Heinrich Klaasen as your front line number 5 and finisher. And that's my best 11 without Riza, because Riza batting at 5 makes no sense to me. Riza batting in the middle overs is really, really hard for me to take as a South African. Tim, you worry about the strike rate. You worry about Riza's strike rate. I worry about Riza's strike rate in the middle overs when he hasn't been able to get a couple of boundaries up top. And that's where my issue lies, is that we picked the team knowing that Heinrich Klaasen was going to probably play all the games. And so the ability because my issue with this is that against Sri Lanka, it looked like it was muddled thinking. Riza got that lovely 39 of 30. Great, we love it. But now Quinton's back, so we don't drop Riza. we drop Heinrich Klaassen, and you just shift everybody down. What does that do to the roles of the players? It just messes it up. And I know it's not like a set thing that you have to adapt, but Aiden Markram batting at 5 is criminal. Very criminal. David Miller batting at 6 is even more criminal, even though he won us the game. And so the other way you go about this is actually push Dwayne up to 6. Yes, Dwayne had that ridiculous shot for the hat-trick against Hasaranga. I get it. I understand it. Dwayne hasn't been on form, but whose fault is that? Put at the door of the coach, because he hasn't been given a lot of opportunities. But this kind of shows you that we don't have the tools to go through this tournament. And that's kind of the scary part about this team. What I would do is bring Heinrich back, drop Reza, largely because of the fact that it works. It makes the balance better. Timber bats at the power play with Quinny, Aiden and Rassie are 3 and 4. And because remember, we're sitting here against Ireland, and Rassie was batting at 5, and we said that's too low. But that's largely the reason, because we're trying to fit another opener in. So I'm not a fan of that. And so that's where I'm at tomorrow.
Look, there are problems with the batting lineup. We can agree with that, and I can agree with your general point. I just don't think that Heinrich is in any position, performance-wise or mentally, to score runs. I think his game is, for a range of reasons, in such a bad place right now that if you bring him in, it's going to create a lot of problems with the batting lineup. I can see that.
When do you think this happened? This mental block and this performance block. Was it before the World Cup? Was it during the warm-ups? Was it during the World Cup?
I think it was before the World Cup. It was before the World Cup it was actually before COVID, before he got COVID. So actually, it happened before, people say, because it became before then. Problems were happening before then. He wasn't given
late last year. Early last year, not last year.
Yes.
In
yes.
Australia.
He was given, he wasn't given, the problem with Ivory, and this is not just a Heinrich problem, it's with everybody in the batting lineup, is they don't have designated roles. So it's, let's pick our best top 6 and just put them anywhere. That's the general thinking that I'm getting from Mark Boucher. It's top 6, and it doesn't matter where you bat, we'll win anyway. And if you don't perform, a bonus will get us out. That is the problem that we have. Heinrich is a good cricketer. He's done it a few times internationally. I just don't think that he's been given, from the outside, doesn't like he's given a designated role. In the same way Pretorius. Pretorius, right. We're going to use you as your bowler, but we're never going to use you as a batsman. Your strike rate is 170, but that's irrelevant because we don't use you. Why don't you use him? Why?
And that was my problem with Sri Lanka. It was sitting there going, when you lose, I would do this. If I lose 2 wickets at the top, right? I wouldn't want Aiden to come in. I'd be like, hold up, Aiden. Let me try bring Dwayne Pretorius in as a pinch hitter. Let's see if we can't get some boundaries early on to see we can go, because he's a boundary striker. Even when he got out, he was trying to hit a 6. He just mistimed it, but he was trying to hit a 6 along on. So it was a brain dead move, but I was like, okay, I get it. It's just take 2 balls, and then try locate the boundaries. So that's where I'm at with Dwayne. I'm with you on that. I think he should be used more as a batsman. I remember we spoke about Dwayne batting at 6. That's never happened, and so that's the issue. A comment from Lawrence. He says he's with me. Most probably see Klaassen back in for Reza tomorrow. Can hit the ball, play spin well, but he's not in form. And that's a selection issue. That's a coaching issue. He also said he's never been the same after getting COVID. So for me, that's it tomorrow. I say tomorrow, win the toss, bat first, put them under pressure with the bat. This is one of the games I think you kind of need to get this batting order in some sort of a form. You're playing a very low confidence Bangladeshi side. Put on a show, 160, 170. Let us see what you're capable of so you can replicate that and get the confidence going to England. If you don't do that tomorrow, you're going to find yourselves in a lot of trouble on Saturday.
Agreed. Just on the thing there. So
Tim, here's a question before you carry on. Tim, I still want you to ask this question. Would you take a 35 of 25 from Riza or a 14 of 5 from Klaassen?
I need a bit, probably the Klaassen. Probably the Klaassen.
Because of the state of where the game would be in.
Yeah, it's because of that would probably be a match-winning score innings, because it would be getting us either to 180 or it would be winning the game with the last 2 or 3 overs of the match, chasing whatever we have to chase.
And Jagannath answers and says, gamble with Klaassen and not Hendricks, and Bavuma should always open. Tim. So, what do you expect tomorrow?
What I would do, so, apologies, it is scandalous. I watched none of the game, but I'm doing a cricket podcast, and I didn't watch a single ball of the Sri Lankan game, so I apologize for that.
You'll be forgiven.
So Riza batted at 5, am I right?
Riza batted at 1. He opened with Quinny. Temba batted at 4. Rassie came in at 3. Aiden batted at 5. And David Miller batted at 6.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay, that's crazy. Okay. Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. But we know it's crazy. We don't need to keep going on about it
multiple times this year. So So I'll just give you my summation. I've spoken about win the toss, bat first, put them under pressure, and then bowl them out. I think tomorrow what we're expecting is a very clinical performance, a very professional performance from the Proteas. Don't play down to the opposition, but play up to them, we'll let them play up to you, and show them who you are. I think this batting lineup will enjoy playing against Bangladesh without Shakib. I think that's a key thing for Bangladesh. I think that effectively kind of kills their game for them. I think for me that's where I'm at with this team. I do hope that they come through. I have a worry about the style of batting that we have, but it's gotten us to where we are right now. You need to win tomorrow. You cannot have slip-ups. Effectively, if you lose tomorrow, there is no tomorrow. You are out of this tournament. It's as simple as that. I don't think I don't see Australia losing to Bangladesh this Bangladesh in this current construct. So I think for me, that's how it is. You also need to kind of push the net run rate up, and so that's why I say bat first. Kind of create a gap. So when you play England, you still end up in a positive if England decide to bowl you out for 100 or 90, whatever England feel like doing on the day. Tim, do you have any final words before we close off?
No, I agree with all of that. My only concern is, I know it's T20 cricket, but I see it's very unlikely that Bangladesh beating us, especially without Shakib. We see off Mahdi Hassan and Mustafa Sir, and it's T20 cricket's a funny game. We've seen it in this tournament. What we don't want to see is complacency. I'm complacent in the way I'm describing it. That's not good. We don't want to see complacency. This is a must-win game. For all must-wins from now on. So as you said, put the foot on the gas and keep it there against Bangladesh. Don't give them any room to breathe.
Yeah, essentially that's what it is. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much to Towhead for joining us. And okay, I've been asked to answer some questions. Would you like to see Klaassen scoring 13 or 15 coming in at 5 ahead of Miller, or Riza opening 15 or 14? I'll pick Riza for the past year coming in ahead of Miller. That's another situation. I want Miller to bat at 5. I'm sorry, guys. I'd rather Klaassen at 6 coming in after Miller, when we know that if Miller's gone, it's over. It's our
Yes.
And then Jagannath, hope the Proteas win handsome so that net run rate will increase any chances of the net run rate coming in for the deciding semi-final. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined us, who's listened to us. Thank you for the comments on YouTube. And guys, thank you very much. Enjoy The game tomorrow will be live at 12 p.m. South African time. And hopefully, we're hoping for a good game of cricket and the South African win. Outside of that, have a great day and a good evening. And le sale kakahiso.